The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GALA webinar series. My name is Manuela Noske, and I'm the Communications Manager at GALA. GALA is a global nonprofit trade association that enables communication and business across languages and cultures. We're headquartered in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And today we have the first of a two-part webinar on managing and training post editors. The second part will be this month on the 21st of May. The way we're dividing the content is that today we will focus on how you create a common perspective between vendors and organizations and how you manage vendor concerns around post-editing. In the next webinar, we will talk about how you build a post-editing training protocol. So to do that and to have a really good and solid discussion on May 21st, which is what we're hoping for, we have two surveys ready in SurveyMonkey that we will send to you after the webinar is over. So to give you a little bit of an insight who we have in the audience today, we have a lot of people who work for language service providers in a variety of roles, but we also have a fair number of client representatives. And then we have people from academia and single language vendors. And what we really want to do with that survey is to get both perspectives, namely the perspective of people who manage and to have to train post editors, but also the perspectives of people who do the actual post editing. So the majority of you will get the survey that looks at this topic from the management perspective, but just a few of you will get the survey that looks at this from the post editor perspective. Everybody in academia will get the post-editor perspective. So please put yourselves in their shoes and tell us what they think, if you can. But LSPs and clients will get the management perspective. It will take us about an hour to get the surveys out to you, and they take about 10 minutes to answer. But please, please, please do spend some time on the surveys so we have a really good basis for a discussion on May 21st. All right, I'm going to get to our typical or usual housekeeping items next. You're all muted because we want to cut down on any background noise. If you have problems of any sort, let me know by using your chat box, and I'll work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, use the number listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in with your phone. And we are, as always, making a recording of this, and you will be able to find it on our website after the presentation, but I will also send a link around by email. If you have questions or comments, please type them into your chat box throughout the webinar. We will have limited time today to get them answered, but we're planning to look at all of those questions, and we will answer them in the second webinar on the 21st. So please do register for the next one as well and call back in. Next, let me just briefly introduce our speaker today, Viveta Gene. Viveta is translation and localization industry specialist at Intertranslations in Greece. With more than 15 years of experience as a linguist and vendor manager, she decided to combine her expertise and know-how to become a language solutions specialist. She has an MA in Translation and New Technologies from the Department of Foreign Languages and Interpreting at the Ionian University, and her main focus now is to promote new trends in the industry, especially where translation skills meet MT technology. MT tools and post-editing techniques are amongst her key fields of interest and also her greatest expertise. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Viveta now.
Okay, thank you, Manuela. It is a great pleasure to talk to you today, and I'm happy to have a diverse audience. So let's start with the management and training challenges of post-editing part 1. In the last decade, there are many challenges for the translation industry related to the post-editing, and there is confusion, concern, anxiety, and reaction from both the LSPs and the vendors. LSPs need to build the role of the post-editor, define the post-editing process, and set accurate expectations for productivity and quality. And on the other hand, Vendors need training in the new service, understand the scope, and adapt to the speed and new quality and productivity requirements. So this webinar, as we said, is consisted of two parts. In the first part, we will try to outline the changes in roles, workflows, and metrics, and of course, the great challenge of training for machine translation and post-editing from both the perspective of the LSPs and the vendors. So based on the concerns surrounding each of the changes, I will try to cover the negative and positive aspects for both vendors and LSPs, and today we will try to answer two of the trio of how-to questions. How do we create a common perspective between vendors and organizations, and how do we manage vendor concerns to be able to build a training protocol together in our second part on 21st of May. So there is the intertemporal question, what is post-editing? And I don't know if you had this article of GALA publication. It was a GALA publication. I shared this with you. It was of Jørgen Danielsen. What is post-editing and why is it so hard? So this publication is dated back in 2013, and if you have read this, it is understood that even if it had been written yesterday, we would probably set ourselves the same questions and concerns. So we have 5 questions. Who should execute the post-editing? Is it a translator, a subject matter expert who understands the target language only, language students, some other low-cost resource, a specially trained post-editor, and so on? Then we have what workflow and metrics should be used for post-editing. Is there a specific workflow applied to post-editing? And is there a standard on what you get after post-editing and what you pay or receive for the service? When should post-editing be used? And does it depend on the type of text, the quality level, the customer agreement? Why should post-editing be used? Is it for the time, for the cost? And how to post-edit machine translated text? Is there a common training protocol in place? And are there training programs for post-editors? And this is the challenge of training. So now that post-editing appears as a rising profession in the translation industry, there are many questions that still need to be addressed. And even if we acknowledge that the first mention to the role of the post-editor was made almost 30 years ago, roles, workflows, and metrics need to be revised in the light of the rising significance of machine translation. Here we have the management challenges, the change of roles, meaning how post-editors should perform and which are the criteria practically for LSPs to recruit the post-editors, the changes in workflows, meaning the tasks and processes that we should follow when the service is post-editing, and the change in metrics, meaning how much should post-editors produce, how do they calculate their productivity, and how LSVs translate speed and productivity in figures and numbers. So we start with the change of roles, and here we will have the first poll for you. Should a translator be a post-editor?
So the poll is open. Please put in your answers. It'll only take you a couple of seconds. And then I will close it and share the results. All right, it's still going actively. We have a lot of people on the call today. But I think we can close and let me share the results with you. So I hope that you can see this, Viveta. 71% of the people who voted said yes. 16 said no, and 13 said they don't know.
Okay, that's great.
So
this is
overwhelming yes.
We would like to have.
Okay, I'm gonna.
It's good to say that it is possible, indeed.
Yes, I'm gonna hide the results.
Okay, So it's great because yes, a translator should be a post editor, but this, as you can see on the slide, it cannot be by magic. We cannot transform by magic a translator into a post editor, as specific conditions should be met to do that. And what's more, if translation and post editing are different, we cannot infer that a good translator will be a good post editor, at least without further training. So what should we check to spot the differences between the roles and give shape to the post editor's profile? Let's see, it is the skills and competencies and the tasks. And combining skills, competencies, and tasks, we can reach and create the profile. So skills and competencies. We start with this, and let's see what you think of this matter. Do translators and post editors have the same skills and competencies?
All right, and the poll is open again. Give us your opinion. Do translators and post editors actually have the same skills and competencies or not? And we're having not a neck to neck, but we're having interesting race here happening. I'll leave it open for a few more seconds. All right, I'm going to close it and share the results with you. So initially it was all no, and then the yeses took over. So we have 22% saying that yes, and 74% of the audience is saying no, they do not have the same skills and competencies, and 4% bowed out and said they don't know. So no is
Okay,
overwhelming.
So no is overwhelming.
74%.
Okay. Let's see, because I would go more that they do have the same skills and competencies at a point like 70%, and then this changes. But okay, it's a yes and a no. Okay, let's see. So here we have a slide, translator versus post-editor competencies. And you can see that there is a comparison between the competencies of the translator and the competencies of the post-editor. Post-editor is blue and translator is like lila, purple, something. Okay, so we have the skills, the competencies, cultural, decision-making, problem-solving, research, technical, subject, textual, transfer competence, and linguistic competence. And the left chart shows the level of these competencies. The right chart shows the effort the post editor puts while using these competencies. So we see that even if the level for all competencies is the same for both translator and post editor, the effort while using these competencies is higher for some of them. The cultural competence in the effort chart is highly used by the translator. For a post editor, this is not the main competence to be used, as the kind of texts that are most appropriate for post editing, like manuals, technical documentation, are not demanding in this aspect. The opposite goes for the decision-making competence and the problem-solving competence. The effort while using these competencies is significantly higher while post-editing. So this competence is used for every segment of the empty output and more than once. Just imagine that for the post-editor, every single word is questioned. A post-editor says, "This is an empty output." Okay. Is it correct? Yes. Solved? No. How can this be solved? Which of my competencies should I use to solve it? So it's a complex situation. Then textual competence and the linguist competence may also be used at a different grade, but occasionally, as texts which are relevant for post-editing do not need to be translated in a creative way due to the limited use of their expressive function. So the outcome is that the extent to which these competencies are used is an index, on one hand, for translators to understand how their competencies work on the job, and on the other hand, for LSPs to be able to draft the correct job description. Now, in the next slide, we're going to see this from a different perspective. The post-editor skills and competencies, which checked on the previous slide, are now grouped. So we have the linguistic skills, the instrumental skills, and the core competencies. The linguistic skills are the textual competence, the cultural competence, and the subject competence. And they include the excellent knowledge of the source and target language, communicative and textual competence in at least 2 languages and cultures, cultural and intercultural competence, and subject area competence. The instrumental competence is the technical competence, and more specifically, knowledge of MT systems, terminology management skills, MT dictionary maintenance, programming skills. We can add here the corpus quality assessment skills and controlled language pre-editing skills. What about now the core competencies? Core competencies are the psychophysiological competence, which allows the post-editor to cope with the subjectivity, to be able to apply the post-editing specifications, and the strategic competence helps post-editors reach at informed decisions, which mean to choose among different post-editing alternatives with no stylistic concerns. Thus, it is clear that instrumental and core competencies are the competencies that differentiate a translator from a post-editor. Now that we checked all these, we can see the tasks. What are the tasks of the post-editor that trigger the competencies and skills described? And here we can have our next poll, I think. Are translators' tasks more complex than post-editors' tasks in terms of effort?
Right, so the poll is up. Are a translator's tasks more complex than a post-editor's task? Let us know what you think. It's a simple, three simple answers, yes, no, or don't know. And now we really have a neck-to-neck race. And I'll let it go. It's interesting for me to see the no's are taking over. I think I can close it. Still a few answers coming in. All right, I'm going to close and share. We have 36% saying yes, they are more complex, but 51% are saying no. So a translator's tasks are not more complex than a post-editor's task, and 13% are bowing out, saying they don't know.
Okay. The truth is that they're not more complex, for me at least, because they're different, so they cannot be compared. It was a tricky question.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so here I have a map. I was looking for something to make it more, how to say, to depict it better. And it is a map showing the quickest trip around Europe, if I can express it in a good way. So I have something like a parallelism. Post-editing tasks need effort and skills. It's not a matter of more effort and skills. The text coming from the machine translation is like a wrong map. So the challenge is to edit the map, detect the locations of the correct terms, and link the elements in such a way to create the faster and safer itinerary to the destination of the pre-established quality final output. I hope that this gives an answer to what happens with the effort of the post-editing. Okay, so let's see this more theoretically now. So the post-editor's tasks is to quickly identify errors and eliminate them according to a pre-established quality level, while the translator, who is trained, has experience in producing text of the highest possible quality without disregarding the overall purpose of the text. So here we have 4 options: translate from scratch, correct a lot of errors, correct a few errors, or accept the machine translation proposal. And then the processes to do that are the source text relating processes, meaning reading the source text to recognize some pattern for the reformulation in the target text. The machine translation related processes, reading the empty output to evaluate whether a reformulation is necessary. Target text production processes, producing a new text with elements that already exist or by adding new ones. Target text evaluation processes, making positive or negative evaluations of the empty output. Reference work related processes, choosing dictionaries and parallel text, etc. Physical writing processes, it is deleting, inserting elements, overwriting, or rewriting. And global task-related processes, which have to do with the order. The subtasks should be processed, and reporting feedback to allow for the machine translation improvement. So the goal is to ensure that the key terminology is correctly translated, that we have grammatically, syntactically, and semantically correct translation, that the formatting is correct, that we have the task completed with reasonable speed, and we have to adhere to the post-editing guidelines to minimize the preferential changes. Now, combining what we saw so far, like the tasks and the competency skills, we can see the profile of the post editor. And here you have the answer to the previous poll. We have skills that are identical, similar, or developed, different, and additional. So the identical skills are the proficient knowledge of the source and contrastive knowledge of the source and target, then specialization in one or more subject areas, similar or developed because they're more developed on the end of the post editor is word processing, terminology management skills, computer skills and CAT tools, and text linguistics knowledge. We can add on the part of the post editor the background knowledge of machine translation technology and history to be able to recognize the types of the different errors and the different levels of expected quality. And then we have different competencies and skills like the extensive cultural knowledge in both languages, which becomes the confidence in abilities and technical expertise for the post editor in the sense that this is prioritized. Then we have for the translator the attention to quality details, while for the post editor the attention to speed details is prioritized, meaning fully key proficiency, efficiency in cursor positioning, and effective use of search and replace functions. And then a negative attitude towards MT from the translator. Okay, this is a little bit exaggerating. Maybe it is neutral or negative attitude, which should be positive attitude towards MT from post editor. Creativity is necessary for the translator, and problem solving and decision making for the post editor. Now, additionally, okay, this does not mean that for the translator we don't have additional things to say, but in comparison, pre-editing and controlled language skills and programming skills are also something plus for the post editor to know, to be able to cope with the tasks in hand. So, the conclusion for this part is a question. Could the post editor be a competitor of the translator? And this is a question for everyone to set it to ourselves, let's say, not to take it as a statement. And I will explain what I mean. If post-editor may be seen as a threat for the role of the translator, and post-editor may be seen as a threat for the rights of the translator. Then post-editor is a new entry, which means innovation, and post-editor means lower rates and higher productivity at the same quality as the translator, while translator means higher rates and lower productivity at the same quality with the post-editor. Okay, so post-editors encounter low competition within the post-editing segment of the translation industry, and translators encounter high competition within the translation segment of the translation industry. So I think that all this gives the evolution, the image of the evolution of the role of the translator to a post-editor. And the question right now is not if machine translation will replace human translation, but it is the post-editor that will possibly replace the traditional role of the translator in the near future due to the evolution of the technology. Just to say that because it is a very critical question in the industry. Okay, and let's move on to the change in workflows. And we have a question for you. At what percentage have you developed an efficient workflow for post-editing?
All right, and the poll is open. At what percentage have you developed an efficient workflow for post-editing? And this is not a trick question. It is either greater than 25% or greater than 50% or 100. But you can also opt out by saying that you either don't know or you just haven't implemented post-editing workflows yet. So there's 5 options, and I'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, I think we're stabilizing. I'm going to close and share. There we go. 23% of the audience is saying at greater than 25% have you developed an efficient workflow for post-editing. We have 27% of the audience saying when you're greater than 50%, and only 6% are saying when you've reached 100%. 27% are saying they have not implemented any post-editing workflow, and 17% are saying they don't know. So it's pretty evenly split between people saying if it's greater than 25 and greater than 50.
Okay, so it's very interesting. This, I think it was 7% that they have implemented the workflow at 100%, you said?
6%, yeah.
Okay, this is really interesting. Okay, so let's see. Let's leave the audience now to weigh themselves against what I have prepared to see if what they answered is what I have in mind. So here we have the post-editing workflow. Maybe I have five phases, maybe it's more than that, but these are the basics I would like to analyze today. Okay, so phase 1, we start from the pre-editing, meaning that we have the source documents and there is a human process here. We need a role, a pre-editor, to process the text, use controlled language, and elevate it and make it, how to say, more relevant for the post-editor in order to have better productivity, higher speed, and have the return on investment that we want in the end. Okay, so from the pre-editing, we receive a source text 0% translated. Then phase 2, this source text goes through translation memory, and what we receive is a hybrid text with only the retrieved matches, which would be the fuzzy matches, etc. Then what is left is the translated segments, which go in phase 3 through the machine translation system, and we receive the hybrid text 100% translated, but with machine translation errors. So this is phase 4 for the post-editing process. For the post-editor, it is a human process. And what we get is the target text 100% translated. Phase 5 is what has to do with quality, meaning the final QA checks, and annotating. It's again a human process. We need a role here, an annotator, to categorize the type of errors and the severity of errors in order to have this feedback and go and optimize the machine translation engine. So this is the workflow in my mind, how this would be ideal. But right now, I suppose that most of the LSPs and the companies use phase 1 after the pre-editing and go until phase 5 QA checks. So pre-editing and annotating are not much developed so far for the majority of the LSPs, and there is a reason for that. So here, in order to have the optimum results in terms of investment, what supports the role of the post-editor is the pre-editing and the annotating phase. Without this, we cannot have a great return on investment in the future. However, the reason that LSPs right now do not have the full post-editing workflow in place is because it needs a great investment to have all the workflow implemented. And to do this investment, they need the education, to have educated their customers, meaning that the customers need to know that for such a workflow and for getting discounts of 60 to 80% thanks to the post-editing, they need to have a constant volume, and not to have one day 5 words and the other day 1 million words. We need to work all the time and be able to invest to get these results. So to enjoy the benefits of post-editing, an investment should be made in the complete post-editing workflow. And of course, for this workflow to work, we need trained project managers, linguistic teams, and SLVs, which will be our topic in part 2 of this webinar. So let's move to the next one and see the steps to implement a post-editor workflow. What we need is research to evaluate the different engines, choose a CAD tool that works with the engines. We recommend using CAD tools that are optimized for post-editing and combine machine translation, translation memory, terminology management, and strong collaboration features to maximize post-editing and team productivity. Then we need to choose the right machine translation for the projects, evaluate the quality of the engines, reevaluate the engines every 6 to 12 months or after a specific number of TUs, and update the standard operating procedures and train the post-editors, and revise the pricing structure and educate the customers. Educate the customers and be aligned with the customers is the most important for this investment in technology, because we have this example of an LSP starting working and building engines, and then have customer who starts implementing a different technology in their company, different TMS, for example. So then they cannot have a return on investment because they are not aligned. We should have a collaborative approach with the customers and be aligned even in terms of the CAD tools we use. So in order to have a common ground, because right now everything is really vague, in 2017, ISO 18587 was published in order to have a single point of reference regarding the service and the guidelines. And I think that this may be useful in case you didn't know. Okay, so let's go and see the changes in metrics, which is the result of the change in roles and workflows. And here we have the next poll, which is the fairest post-editing compensation strategy?
Yes, sorry, I was distracted here for a moment. So you've got 5 answers here: flat rate, post-editing distance, PED, an agreed upon hourly rate between the LSP and the single language vendor, fixed hourly rate, or post-editing matrix based on measurements from translators. So you've got 5 different options here. What do you consider the fairest post-editing compensation strategy? How do you want to pay your post-editors? And we're still getting answers, so I'm going to leave it open for a little longer. And I think we're stabilizing, so I will close. 2 more seconds. All right, closed, and here come the answers. 12% of the audience is saying a flat rate would be appropriate. 17% go for the post-editing distance rate. 42 say they would want to see an agreed upon hourly rate, so agreed between the LSP and the single language vendor who's carrying out the work. A fixed hourly rate is favored by 5%, and a post-editing matrix that's based on measurements from translators, 24%. So the majority, 42%, wants to see an agreed upon hourly rate. Then a post-editing matrix is preferred by 24%. And then next contender is PED, flat rate, and only 5% are saying an hourly rate.
Okay, good. There is a variety in the answers. Okay, so let's see. We have the flat rate, the post-editing distance, the customized hourly rate, the fixed hourly rate, and the matrix. All of them, each of them, has negative and positive aspects. So the flat rate, for me, it is the more transparent way of all available for LSPs to do business with vendors and customers and make them all happy. The flat rate can only be applied if there is an evaluation of the empty output against the TEP in terms of productivity and quality to be able to have a solid ground. And this is what we opt for. It is the TEP-Q method, train, evaluate, prove, and qualify at Intertranslations to evaluate empty output, set rate for vendors, and offer the relevant discounts to end customers. The positive is transparency, and the negative is that it needs investment in specific training for vendors, customers, and internal staff. Then the post-editing distance measures the editing effort required, and the benefits are that we can track the performance of a specific machine translation engine over the time. We know the amount of changes made in a specific job. We can compare the post-editing distance in different languages and compare how much editing different post-editors do in the same project. And we can estimate how well a specific engine will perform on a specific content type. So I suppose that this is the best and favorite strategy for engineers and MT developers, if we ask them for that, I don't know. But it is not transparent, it is not the favorite from vendors, from my experience as a vendor manager, because they're getting confused and they can only know how much they will be paid only after completing the task. So here, if we want to go for this post-editing distance, we need to provide vendors with some proofs of their effort, like an analysis or the text with track changes on, to be able to understand that what they do is what they get paid. And sometimes what they get paid is not really what they do, because there is a cognitive effort involved in their tasks, and the time needed is more than the changes made, if I can express it in a clear way. Okay, so then we have your favorite, the customized hourly rate. And for this one, the only negative we can say is that we need to set the customized hourly rate per project or per account, because we cannot have the same productivity for every project if we have a business or we have something with dense terminology. Even if it is calculated per hour. And then we should calculate this in specific intervals, because when we start, the productivity may be 500 words per hour, but then after some time, if we receive 100,000 words from the customer, then the productivity may be 700 words per hour and go up to 1,000 words per hour. So this is to be revised from time to time. Then the fixed hourly rate, which is normally set and based on a measurement from trusted translators, is more subjective. This cannot be proven. So if we have a junior profile post editor and the measurement has been made against a senior post editor, then this is going to be exaggerated, and it's not going to be realistic and accepted. And last, we have the matrix, which is something that is used in the market, but it combines both translation memory and machine translation. It mixes the translation memory weighted word count with the post-editing weighted word count with some algorithm, etc., which are not the case of this webinar. And this, again, is confusing for the post editors, and it's not transparent enough. So the conclusions are that if post editing, machine translation is two times faster than a traditional translation approach, there is justification for reducing rates to 50% of the regular rate. Then the rate setting process should be as transparent as possible to avoid translator resistance, and we need to develop win-win scenarios and develop a collaborative approach between LSPs and SLVs. So now that we have covered the roles, workflows, and metrics, the next challenge arising is the training of all stakeholders. Who are involved in this training challenge? We have the vendors, the LSPs, the universities, and the end customers. So now we will cover the basic training gaps. You can see here on this slide, we have the lack of training programs for post-editing, lack of one single official and consistent set of guidelines, and the lack of post-editing style guides. Actually, the third one is, is connected with the second. So let's start with the lack of training programs. It seems that despite the evidence that post-editing and translation differ, there is no standard as to how post-editing should be taught and what type of information helps the most in becoming a good post-editor. So nowadays, large companies try to offer a minimal training to their translators, and the guidelines tend to be relatively vague. In the past few years, several university translation programs have acknowledged the need to introduce machine translation into their curriculum, and this is really important and helpful. But there is a long way to reach a point to have these first post editors in the market. Now, regarding the lack of one single official and consistent set of guidelines, this is actually the purpose of this webinar, of the second part, upon completing the survey, to have all the perspectives and try to build together one global set of guidelines, at least for the LSPs and the SLVs, or for GALA, let's say, if we have this opportunity. Okay, so here, if you imagine that we have the vendors, the SLVs, who are working with many different companies, if they have all the effort, the cognitive, the temporal, the technical effort during the post-editing, and the challenge to work with different post-editing guidelines for each of the companies they work for, then this is getting really hard, really confusing, and they get frustrated and not very willing to work in post-editing. So the other thing is that in these existing guidelines of each LSP, there are many theoretical examples, or there are few examples. Theoretical examples, more theoretical exams are better than few, but then we need something more, how to say, more interactive. It's very tiring to read the instructions all the time and guidelines. So there needs to be practice, something like a test, something like a class, something different for them to be able to assimilate the guidelines. So this is the important thing here and the basic training gap. And let's see the training challenges for each of them, for each category. So for the LSPs, we need to identify the differences in job description of translator and post editors, and I hope that we helped you to identify what they are. The trainability of post-editing skills and competencies, and to do that, they need the necessary workload for post-editing machine translation. Then a great pain is the training for all production members, the vendor managers, the project managers, the linguistic teams, the vendors, and the customers. And to do that, they need a recommended methodology for post-editing machine translation, which can only be done in cooperation with the universities. Then, the challenges for the universities. They need to have tests for productivity, problem solving, decision making, and to check these competencies and identify the relevant candidates. Because not all translators and in the undergraduate stage can become post-editors, so it is better if we can sort out this. Then they have the challenge to familiarize students with the theory and current practice in the MTPE, and the practice is a real challenge because they need to have cooperation with LSPs to do so. Then give emphasis to the recognition of empty errors and programming skills. But these programming skills are advanced and need more time to be acquired. So probably in the undergraduate level, we need to devote more time to practice these skills and learn these skills. And then the post-editing is introduced as a new discipline at a later stage of the undergraduate level and or master. So this means that it should be introduced earlier to have the time to produce, quotation marks, the correct post-editors for the market. And of course, the greatest importance is the cooperation with LSPs for volumes and resources to promote research. So we see how the LSPs and universities start to become a chain. One needs the other in order to have the post editors trained in the market. And here we can see the training challenges for vendors, for SLVs. This is completely different. They have the cognitive effort, the temporal effort, and the technical effort, which means that they need to make the most out of their cognitive background and use all the means, the technical means that they have in order to reduce the speed and increase the productivity. This increases the psychological effort, and the psychological effort becomes even higher when it is combined with the payment ambiguity and the specifications of the post-editing project, which differ per company, per project, per account, etc. So, having seen all that, now we can go and see the trio of how-to questions. And today we're going to talk about how to create a common perspective between vendors and organizations and how to manage vendor concerns. The third part is going to be the result, as we said, of the survey and of our discussion. And I want you to have some time to think over what we said today. Okay, so how to create a common perspective between vendors and organizations. A good way to do this is to see how the negative perspectives of each party converge. So we will first check their negative points and then continue with their common positive points. The negative perspective for SLVs and LSPs. You can see here on this slide that we have low rates, higher productivity, and less room for creativity for SLVs, which is translated in narrow profit margins and higher management costs for LSPs. Then we have the investment in training for all the departments, the project managers, the vendor managers, and the linguists. Machine translation is only appropriate in specific situations. Machine translation engines are replacing translators, which is translated in lack of post editors, and this makes the LSPs forcing the translators to become post editors and creates a vicious circle. The differentiated level of quality per project, and this is the same for LSPs, the expectation of higher, not sustainable productivity, no internationally adopted guidelines, these are negative points in common, and the payment ambiguity for SLVs, which is the lack of a solid ground for the metrics, not absolutely, but at some point for LSPs. So the solutions for these negative points for SLVs are to learn to work with engines, understand their own throughput with and without machine translation, get examples from the LSPs of machine translation before accepting the work, and develop rapid error detection and correction skills. For the LSPs, we need to understand that different vendors have different capabilities, learn how to optimize machine translation and communicate with machine translation developers, learn to use power tools to improve productivity, and add glossaries and regex rules to this end, and retrain the engines frequently. So the positive perspective of SLVs and LSPs is that we both have higher volumes of work. Post-editing as a productivity tool to avoid repetitive tasks and automate them means a higher capacity and more opportunities for LSPs. For SLVs, we have a new set of skills, which is a new workflow for LSPs. The standardization of terminology for SLVs means lower localization cost and increased terminology consistency for LSPs. And of course, they both have the competitive advantage against all the others who do not use post-editing and machine translation technology. So we need to apply a collaborative approach and share with the SLVs that we have the same perspective. To establish a common perspective, we need cooperation and communication strategy, as we all need to adapt to the evolution of the technology and implement it to our benefit. How to manage vendor concerns? To manage vendor concerns, what is needed is to understand the way of thinking of vendors and try to balance. So if you see these questions, which are very typical, will machine translation replace human translation? What is the benefit for me to say yes to post-editing? Will I get paid less, etc.? These show the fear. They have a common, the fear of the unknown. And when people fear, they do everything that is needed to be protected, like the situation we're running through right now. So this is known and called defense. And the only way to manage vendor concerns is to make the unknown known. Vendors need training, companies need both training and strategy. And these are the two aspects that we will try to cover. What strategy to follow and what training to follow. The strategy. We need a global training strategy to address the key areas relating to post-editing MT and prevent vendor concerns. So we need the optimal workflow strategy, quality and measurement strategy, human resources training strategy, custom engine improvement and feedback strategy, post-editor compensation strategy, and post-editor recruitment and retention strategy. Then, the training to follow. We need to understand the new roles, understand the new tasks, and establish a new balanced approach. And to do that, because this is going to be our next, it's going to be our next webinar. It's how to build the machine translation post-editing training protocol. We need to understand the new roles, the pre-editor, the post-editor, and the annotator, understand the evolution from the author copywriter to the pre-editor, the evolution from the translator to the post-editor, and the evolution from the reviewer to the annotator. Then we have the project manager, we have the MT developer, and the vendor manager. And about the project manager, we're going to see which machine translation engine to use, what terminology and glossary to leverage, how to incorporate post-editor's feedback, how to improve a custom machine translation engine, how to manage trained post-editors, and all the attributes that these new roles in the post-editing workflow acquire. So we'll try together to build this training protocol, and to do that, we need the cooperation of all of you in this chain, the universities, the LSPs, and the vendors. And the survey is, as we said, it has 20 questions, 15 on the general post-editing background and 5 training specific. And I chose to have 2 differentiated questionnaires for LSPs, organizations, and SLVs, with 1 common group to identify a strategy to build a global training protocol for post-editing.
Thank you, Viveta. We are out of time. We're at the top of the hour. So thank you so much for taking us through all the details around the post-editing training and the challenges around it. We need to call it quits. As soon as I end this webinar, you'll get a quick little survey that comes through GoToWebinar, just asking, how did you like the presentation today? But keep your eyes open. You will get a mail through SurveyMonkey today with the actual survey that we'd love for you to fill out so we have a good and solid discussion on May 21st, which is when we will also answer many of the many questions that came in today. So come on back on the 21st, and in the meantime, fill out the survey. And with that, Viveta, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Join us again on the 21st. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.